Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to talk about 4 tips for mental practice for pianists and other musicians. And on this channel, hope to share with you strategies, mindsets, methods, and other ideas to help you in your piano playing, hopefully in other areas as well. So I'm here in Pudong, Shanghai right now, and behind me is Shanghai Tower, one of the tallest buildings in the world, along with 2 other really tall buildings. And I'm spending time here with my wife and in-laws, family here, and doing a lot of mental practice while I'm here because I'm not always able to access an instrument normally each day. You know, we're busy, traveling around, doing lots of fun things, and I know that's the case for many adults out there, many students out there as well too. And so I do a lot of mental practice to get in my hours of practice each day, sometimes with the music, sometimes without the music. And a lot of the time people will ask, how do I get started doing that? What's the best way to start doing mental practice? And so just 4 quick tips or ideas here. First one I would say is you want to start small and simple. And this means both horizontally and vertically. You want to start with the smallest component elements. So instead of starting with both hands, I would start with separate hands. Instead of starting with the whole page or even a whole line, you may start with just 2 measures, you may start with just 1 measure, you may even start with just fractions of a measure. And that might seem really weird to only practice just playing half of a measure, one hand alone, to imagine that in your mind, but that truly is the best place to start. Just like with physical practice, you want to start with that which is doable. So whatever you can imagine fairly clearly, you should start with that, even if it's a quarter of a measure, one hand alone. And along those lines, I'll say that the second tip would be to utilize spaced repetition. So instead of trying to imagine that over and over again, you have to realize that you really can't push it in terms of massed repetition. The same way as if we learn a new fact, we wouldn't just repeat that to ourselves over and over again. It actually makes a lot more sense to practice that quarter of a measure, just for instance, right hand alone, and then you move on from it. Imagine the next quarter of a measure, right hand alone, and then you move on from it. So imagine little sections, move on from them rapidly, and you do not try to hold on to them. You're going to forget them anyway, just like with physical practice. And then if you come back the next day and then you reimagine them again, you relearn them again, you will notice that you'll start to be able to picture it more clearly. So it's really not so different from physical practice. Coordinations, they will not just stick if you just play something 30 times in a row on the first day. You want to allow spacing to happen in between because the effort of retrieval is what helps to form long-term connections in the brain. So instead, you want to kind of bake that into the equation. You're combining the first and second tips. You're practicing these small, tiny little sections, and then you are moving on from them purposely. Every single time that you forget and then you have to reimagine the areas again, your mental practice will grow stronger. And just to clarify at this point, I'm talking about like imagination of you playing the keyboard. It's kind of like your keyboard vision. What does it look like if you are, literally playing, which fingers are playing which notes on the keyboard? I'm not talking about imagining the music. The third thing I would say would be to just start with a little bit each day, because it's really like a new thing a new muscle you're flexing, a new thing that you're training your brain to do. In the beginning, it's very normal to get tired or get very disoriented or confused, fatigued when you start doing it. So I would start just the same as if you were starting physical practice with an instrument for the first time. Don't overdo it. Start with even just, a minute or 2 of mental practice. Maybe it could be a few minutes, 5 minutes, but don't try to imagine yourself playing for an hour or something right off the bat. I would start small and then gradually work up over time. And this works very well in combination with those tiny little areas that I talked about and with the spaced repetition, the rapidly moving on from things. And finally, the 4th tip I would say would be to cultivate what I call mixed practice. And mixed practice is really mixed mental and physical practice, meaning if it's too difficult to just outright imagine things away, like, I'm here right now, I can imagine the music in my head, and you might say like, well, I'm trying to do that, David, and I can't imagine anything at all. So instead, when you're at the instrument, how about play those little tiny sections I talked about earlier physically and then play them mentally directly afterwards? You could play like half of a measure with your left hand alone, paying close attention to it. Then you take your hand up and then you imagine it, right? Maybe the next half of a measure, you play that little area left hand alone physically at the piano or whatever instrument that you play, and then you imagine that in your head afterwards. And even if it's an instrument that's not the piano, many times you're going to be utilizing both of your hands, or you're going to be utilizing, different parts of your body. You can still break things down smaller. You can still isolate body parts in whatever way makes most sense for your instrument. So as you continue to do these things, you'll gradually realize these images are getting clearer day by day, and I'm not getting fatigued so often. And this very tiny little sections, they're starting to link together into larger sections over time. And I'm able to imagine things much more consistently. So yeah, it's those little seeds that you're planting now that are going to lead to bigger progress in the future. And the reward, one of the many rewards, would be that you can practice in many more different situations, of course, right? So while I am traveling here, I'm not restricted by the instrument. Instead, I'm able to get in my practice through a combination of, studying the score, walking around with my family, waiting in line, and then of course when I'm actually literally at the instrument itself. Anyway, hope you found this helpful. Let me know if you have questions. I definitely have more tips and ideas that I'll share. You can also search David Chang mental practice, and I think you'll find shorts of me doing mental practice. You'll find a few other long form videos as well. So yeah, please like, subscribe, let people know about the channel if you found this helpful, and looking forward to the next one.